and welcome to Your Gov Non-Part, Political Science and Government for Everyone. And welcome to our next segment on our series dealing with how bills become laws. One of the things that we have to address early on is amendments. And when an amendment is not truly an amendment. Well, it's not an amendment when it's a rider. Now, an amendment is specifically dealing with changes to a piece of legislation, either deletions or additions or rewordings that deal with the topic at hand, that deal with the legislation itself. Such as a piece of legislation, say, that deals with the number of days you have to respond to an action for a foreclosure is set at 20 days. 20 days is not very specific, so an amendment may be introduced to the legislation before it's voted on to say 20 calendar days or 20 business days or 20 days excluding Sundays. Whatever, it's going to give the legislation more specificity and either a broader or narrower scope. A rider, by contrast, is an amendment, but it's a slang term used for an amendment which is not germane to the issue and intent of the legislation under consideration. Now, why would you do this? Well, there are two reasons, and they're usually either to push an agenda or a particular partisan agenda. The first of these is to use it to get past unpopular legislation by attaching it, making it ride on the back of an important piece of legislation, a highly important piece of legislation. Usually this happens with appropriations bills, say the budget for the coming year, or appropriations for the military. Some piece of unpopular legislation, something that doesn't have a great deal of support, a group may get together and attach it as an amendment to a much larger and highly important piece of legislation in order to ramrod it through. Because, well, nobody wants to vote against the appropriations bill for the U.S. military, so they'll vote for it and eat it. And when it gets to the president, he's not going to want to veto it because they need this appropriation, so he'll sign it. The other case in where a rider is used is called a poison pill, and this is something that's designed to kill a piece of legislation. It's usually attached as a rider to a less important piece of legislation, but one that is maybe not popular or has only popularity in one party and not the other. Say, for example, the majority party, whichever party that is, puts forth a piece of legislation which is very unpopular with the minority in a particular, in the House and the Senate. The minority might attach a rider which is completely tangential to the intent of the original legislation in order to make it such that nobody wants to vote for the original legislation, or that if they do, the president will find it so repugnant that he will veto it. And he doesn't have a choice. It's an all or nothing. The president isn't given a line item veto power under the Constitution, so he either signs the legislation, doesn't sign it and allows it to go into law by default, or vetoes it. You know, an example might be a piece of relatively innocuous legislation, say dealing with a small appropriations for a particular project, but it's unpopular with the minority party, who might then attach just a horrifically egregious, non-germane piece of amendment to it, such as, oh, okay, yeah, that's fine, but it's subject to the fact that there will be a 75% federal excise tax on milk or coffee. Something that's so horrific that nobody's, even the party that put it forth, isn't going to want to vote for it, because when their constituency finds out, yeah, you voted in favor of a 75% federal excise tax on coffee, I'm not going to be happy. So they're not going to vote for it. Or if they go, everybody's going to know this is just silly. They go ahead and they pass the legislation. It's going to get to the president, and the president's going to go, no, there's no way. I mean, yeah, we need this legislation, but the rider is so incredibly egregious that I have to veto this. It's to force a veto or to force it to die in vote within the House or the Senate. So hopefully this helps you understand that a rider is in fact an amendment, but it's a slang term used for a type of amendment which is not germane to the initial intent or content of the legislation under consideration and why it's used. A rider does have some ethical questions about it. You know, there may be reasons, but it is, I believe, ethically questionable. So I'd like to thank you for joining YourGov Non-Part in this segment on our series about how bills become laws. We hope you'll join us by either picking subscribe above or at the button here on the screen. You can join us on Facebook with the link below. We'd certainly appreciate it if you would take the time to rate this video, either like or dislike. If you have questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section below, and we will answer them as quickly as we possibly can. And again, thank you for watching.